So I know we kind of I literally looked you up on like IMDb Pro to get your information when we first talked a couple weeks ago. Um, and I've kind of like I said, I found you on the Indie Film Hustle podcast. Um, and I've kind of like been following your career, from a distance for a little bit. Um, so I was wondering if you can kind of, for everybody listening, just kind of give a brief overview of your background, how you got started in the film industry, kind of the stuff that led up to like your first feature, and then we can get into other stuff that you're doing now.
Totally, yeah. I started out, just like anybody else should, just making movies in my backyard. This was the 2000s, so it was before like iPhones could really do that. So it wasn't as common as, kids nowadays being able to do that more freely. So it kind of taught me to learn a little bit more about how cameras worked and, kind of segmented me from the sort of that social media generation, and so I was really able to focus more on the fundamentals and watched a lot of movies, and that basically put me on a track towards longer form stuff, feature films, TV, that sort of thing. Whereas I feel like nowadays, most people start in the short form content and then have to try to kind of expand, and that's a lot of people that I know you've been working with on your projects. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was in high school and I applied to a bunch of film schools and a couple of other non-film programs because I had good grades and everything, so I could wanted to see where I could get scholarships and that sort of thing, and I ended up getting the best scholarship from USC, and the film school accepted me through their cinema studies program. And so I went and did a feature film like mockumentary my last like month that I was in high school, and had like a premiere, and that was super fun. And it really I really caught that bug of realizing I loved feature length content. And at the time when everyone else, and especially as I went to film school, everybody I met there, they were all about shorts. They were all about TV pilots, that sort of thing, and really the attention of on features had kind of started to wane. And I think that's always a world that I've loved a lot. It's always a world I've wanted to stick in. There's nothing wrong with the other ones. There's nothing wrong with anything from short form to X, Y, and Z. But I definitely caught that bug at the end of high school. I did 4 years at the film school. Really tried to get involved with everything I could. Took a lot of paths, creatively that didn't amount to much. I got into virtual reality for a while. I got into a bunch of other things that were just kind of accessory and not didn't really pan out to be what I'd hoped, but continued to learn and continued to educate. And then a year out of school, went and made a film called The Last Whistle, which was how you found me on Indie Film Hustle. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
really cool movie. It was the kind of movie that I don't think you could do again at that scale nowadays. It's like at the time it felt like, man, I wish we were making this 10 or 20 years ago. But, even looking back on it 5 years later, I'm happy we did it when we did, because it would have been even harder to do on, post inflation, post coronavirus, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had that movie, but then COVID hit, and had to, no one was making sports movies because you have to have people in like a stand for sports movies, and nobody was
Mm-hmm.
going to sports for a year or two. And so I jumped into books. I was writing books for a while, picking up little commercial jobs here and there. A couple of those books have now been published, and I just announced the third and the fourth. And those haven't really been cash cows or anything, but I realized over the time of writing those books, I think I really hit my like 10,000 hours, the sort of that theoretical point where, it just kind of like, it just becomes like second nature to write and to write well. And then,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was working on a documentary throughout the coronavirus period as well. And that one I think I'll be releasing later this year. And then now I'm kind of going full circle, and now I'm back into sports features, which was exactly, where I wanted to be and where I, wanted to be moving forward. And I've been working with, I have an agent as of last year, which has been really helpful, and we'll see where that goes. So just continuing to, follow the stream where it leads, but that's sort of the bird's eye view of my last 10 or 15 years.
Okay. Um,
Yeah,
so let's go back in time for a minute because I've
of course.
noticed with you, I think we have a couple of things in common where I did not start out doing camera work. That's not my thing. You can look up YouTube videos and be like, okay, this is exposure, this is lighting, this is like, and I'm like, I really don't care. I can do it and learn because I like learning things, but I'm like, don't give me a camera on set. Like that's not was not my experience. My experience was just writing, like purely writing. I've been writing since I was a kid. Then I also went to film school, but it wasn't a 4 year thing. It was like an 8 month intense program.
It does
And so
not
I
have to
went,
be X, Y, or Z. Yeah,
right.
there's nothing wrong with it. It's just good to learn.
Yeah. So I was, going into it thinking, okay, I'm just going to write scripts. And that was eventually with COVID and certain things that happened. I also had some business experience where I was like, ended up producing my own stuff and actually enjoyed that part of it. So I'm just curious with you mentioned the camera work, but you also write a lot. Like, where did both of those themes come into play? Was that something you did when you were younger, or because it's hard to do both? Not everyone can do all those things.
No, and I don't recommend that everyone do both. I think you need to do, I mean, you really need, you need to do whatever you could do. Like, you have to think about it as, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? If I did this every day for the rest of my life, would I be happy or sad? And when it came to the writing and it came to, being on set and directing, those are the two things I would love to do every day for the rest. Like, I would not kill for that, but I would theoretically, hypothetically do whatever I had to do to do those things. So it's just finding whatever you are the most passionate about, and I saw that a lot at USC, like the king of film schools, right? Everybody shows up, and every single one of those people wants to be either a director or like an Oscar-winning screenwriter, and by the time they all graduate, I would guess like 10%, out of all the people that came in still want to do that when they leave 4 years later. And for the most part, it's
Mm-hmm.
either because they realize, oh, this is way too hard and I'm not up to it, if you realize that and you go and jump to a different career, good for you. But I think the rest of them, it came down to, what, I don't, I think I just wanted to be a writer or a director because I wanted to be in charge and all these things. But I really like sound, or I really like producing, or I really like, being a manager or an agent. And that, you find your passion for whatever it is that you are most passionate about. And that was what I saw with the other half. So for me, I really knew that was what I wanted to do from the outset. What I found out I did not want to do was actually the camera work. Running around in your
Mm-hmm.
backyard with the camera, you learn the most about it so that you can do it if you need to. It's a lot more cost effective to not have to have a DP if you don't need to. But I know that if anytime I have a DP, they do a lot better work than I do. They add a level of creativity to the project. And so I started out really as a very, very amateur director of photography, and I realized very quickly that was not what my skill set was best at. It was best at what you're talking about, things like story and things like performances and really making whatever you film really communicate through the camera and to the audience. And I think that's an
Mm-hmm.
important thing to point out is it's just thinking about there are so, especially in that film school cycle, and you might have seen this in your own, there are so many students that, and even, professionals that focus on how good things look in the camera. And they're looking at the monitor and it's like, wow, that looks so good. This is such a beautiful image, and
Mm-hmm.
then you play the movie back and the performances are not very good, the script is not well written, all the things, you could have the worst looking movie, but if the performances and the script are awesome, people will watch it. It's not the other way around. If you have a beautiful looking movie and you don't put any time into the script or into the performances and the directing and the vision, it's just gonna, it's gonna kind of look like oh, it's beautiful, but I don't know why, I don't know why I need to give it my time, and
Hmm.
that's the thing I think they don't really teach so much in film. So anyway, that's, as you're saying, the importance of story, and that's where I really glommed on.
Yeah. You sort of cut off just a briefly when you were saying your favorite parts. So you say it was writing and directing, or what were
Yeah,
you?
writing and directing are my
Okay.
favorites, big time.
Okay. Nice. Um, yeah, because I guess we can lead into a little bit of. By the way, anybody listening, if you haven't seen his first feature, Last Whistle, it was very good. They have to go see that first so that they can follow the rest of your career. But
Thank you for the plug.
yes, because I'll mention this in the intro as well. But obviously you were pretty young to have gotten it on Netflix. As a young filmmaker, I know that was like a big thing in your career. That I'm also curious. You said you have an agent now, but now is the agent as a writer or is it as like what kind of agent is it?
It is as a writer. And I think that was
Mm-hmm.
one of the hardest parts about having done Last Whistle and having had so much success with it in some areas, and having other areas not be as successful. I was that it did not get me that manager or that agent after, it was in theaters and it was on Netflix, and, I was just so hungry to keep doing that next thing. And it didn't lead to representation directly, but it gave me a foundation that I could continue to build on, and that's hard to say. I think the agent I have now I got through my writing more so than from the Last Whistle, but the Last Whistle was crucial in that it doesn't make me totally I don't know. It doesn't. It. I have one thing on my resume, I guess, is kind of what I can say, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important in some ways, and it's an experience I'll never regret, because it was I learned more doing that than maybe. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it without the years of film school beforehand, but I learned as much in that year or two of doing Last Whistle as I did in the 3 or 4 years that I was at USC, and the two really, had a lot of crossover. So, I'm headed into my late 20s, early 30s, feeling, well educated, which I guess is nice. That's good. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the movie did not lead directly to the representation. I had to keep writing. It was a connection I made on the movie, a friendship there that I got recommended to the agent through where he was working. So it's hard to say, but it was the trip to getting the agent was like a 6 or 7 year process, and that was not an easy wait. I did not like that.
Wow. Yeah. So because I'll just go ahead and mention because I was looking at some of your books recently, started reading the first couple pages of Power to the Players, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, I'm not a gamer person. I was like trying to figure out what is this about, and then you have more recently the Wedding March. So I'm curious. Um,
That was an easier read. I recommend that one as a first one. Power to the Players. I wrote for a Reddit. Really wrote for that Reddit community that is following GameStop and continues to. And that's a very inside
mhm.
baseball book. But the Wedding March is a lot easier of a read.
Yeah. So the Wedding March is it inspired by some events from COVID, or
Hmm.
can you go into a little
That's
bit about
Yeah,
the books and kind of how you transitioned? Did COVID had something to do with you starting to move into books as opposed to obviously because
yeah.
everything was shut down?
Right. So everything was shut down, so they weren't making a lot of screenplays, especially not without like attachments, and it's like there was not a lot of development or whatever happening. It was just a mess for 2020, 2021, and in California, 2022. Like it's you kind of forget that like California's COVID deal ended in like, late 2022. I don't remember the exact date, but they went on for at least a year or two longer than anybody else did. And so you had the shows that were still going that were able to keep producing content, but in terms of like film and TV, it was really tough to get stuff going, and the infrastructure was not there, and prices were all over the place, and All that to say, it was not a good time to try to get an agent purely based off of a good screenplay because, it's like good screenplays didn't really amount to much when things were so slow. And we saw that again last year with the strike, with the WGA strike. Again, it's like, what good is a screenplay from an unrepresented writer when the entire union is on strike? So that's where I
Mhm.
kind of had to be smart and had to think about why I need to diversify my work. They in at USC they always were preaching, and this may be good advice or bad advice, I don't know, but they always preached, if you can't sell your screenplay, like turn it into a book, and you hear that all the time, but not every script writer is a great author, and I wouldn't say I'm the best author either. But it gave me a creative outlet during COVID and gave me a way to keep working. And it gained me a book agent more quickly than because getting a book agent is a lot different than getting a film and TV agent. And it's, in my opinion, a little more straightforward, a little easier. So I got a
Mhm.
book agent a lot more quickly. And so that put me on that 2 or 3 year journey. And then I came back to the screenplays as things started to open back up again. The Wedding
Yeah.
March is based on a true story. To get back to your, sorry, I tangent. The Wedding March
No,
is
that's
based
okay.
on my own true story. It's based on getting married during COVID, trying to do it legally, trying to do it safely, and where sort of the local government and the state government and kind of looking at like, okay, let's take a really nonpartisan look at what policies worked and which ones didn't, and do it with sort of the spoonful of sugar of a really interesting story. And it's about my wedding planner, and she was just amazing, and she planned out my wife and I's wedding and just did a great job. And then she led this whole march to try to save the jobs of people that were in the wedding industry. And so she's got a really cool story, and that's why I thought it was worth doing the book and hopefully someday a movie.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting because I didn't piece that together yet. I don't know if I skipped something or I didn't realize it was about. So is your specific story in the book as well as hers?
Yeah, I'm in like 2.5 chapters basically. It's mostly about our
Hmm.
wedding planner. I didn't want to make it about me, but I am in it.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. Well, I can kind of relate to that, not because of my own wedding, but
Oh
what
yeah.
year? Well, my sister, her wedding was. I'm from Florida, so in our state, it was like 1 or 2 days before they started shutting stuff down, and
Wow.
it was her photographer a couple days before the wedding was like starting to text her these weird like, oh, we know somebody that's really sick and they're saying this is going to happen, and we're like, what are y'all talking about? At that point it was like very very early on, so we had no idea what was really going on. We just knew that something was coming supposedly, and there were quite a few people who didn't come to the wedding, but they made it like right before things were shutting down.
Wow.
So
Yeah, ours was August 2020, so we were in between sort of that phase where everything kind of went up, and then there was a later, during the winter, everybody got sick again, and so we actually kind of landed in the middle where everybody thought not that it was over, but that it was going to keep getting better. And but nobody got sick,
mhm.
and we had a real small wedding, so we didn't want a big wedding to begin with, and it was again, it was we don't regret doing it. It was a good experience. I'm glad your sister was able to get married because it ruined everybody. It ruined a lot of ceremonies, which was a bummer, and careers, obviously.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, and that's definitely an interesting thing that I think is underrated. That it's the opposite of what I was taught in film school. That you kind of do, I think, subconsciously, is that when you get out of film school, you realize that all the stuff that you're gonna do something with as far as stories is like stuff that's either happened to you or things that you're exposed to in real life, or it's like all the scripts that I wrote pretty much in film school I could care less about now because I'm like, they were
Hmm.
based in places I wasn't from, about people, like, you know what I mean, like you're in a world where you're in California and I was in New York, whatever, and you're inspired by your surroundings a lot, but it's not really like you as a person. So I personally realized later on, I'm like, I'm like, those stories mean nothing to me at this point. but it's like the things that actually happen to you like later, you're like, oh, I could actually do something with that. Have you found that? Obviously, you found that to be somewhat true as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and that's, and again, that's like another pitfall is you can go to film school in a big city and you can get drawn into that bubble and think that everybody in that bubble thinks the way that everybody else in the country does. And whatever city that is, whether it's a political thing or it's just a societal thing or whatever it is, you pretty quickly realize that the people that are buying tickets to movies do not do not have a lot of the same characteristics as the people that are behind the camera. And I think that's a really interesting phenomenon and something I've always been acutely aware of is that I want to make movies for people that buy tickets to movies. And those people are not, for the most part, they're not acutely political or, it's like they're going to movies to escape. And I think I love that aspect of escapism and commerciality and, trying to make people laugh, make people cry, like the reason that we used to go to movies classically. And you can really get drawn into a bubble. And if you get into that, it can turn into, oh man, I need to make a movie about this. I need to make a movie about that. And I'm, as someone who's got a documentary coming out that's about a political issue, it's definitely not something that you don't want to do because you're welcome to do whatever you want. It's whatever you're best at telling the story, but you never want to lose sight of the fact that what still sells the most tickets is making people laugh, making people cry, making people feel things, and giving people that ability to escape and see inside themselves whenever they step into that theater or they, open your movie on a streaming device or whatever it may be. And then to talk about, using yourself as a vehicle, it's great up to a point, and it helps you write stories that you do care about, that you do know about.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. While we take a quick break, I wanted to let you know that this week, the sponsor of this podcast episode is actually my own company, My Sunshine Media. And my company is personally a faith-based Christian company where we are creating modern Christian media for multiple age groups, multiple audiences, and we do this through books, films, short films we make, podcasts, and other media content. So if you want to support what we do, please consider donating to us. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, there is most likely a link in the description below, or you can go to our website, mysunshinemedia.co, to find out more. That's mysunshinemedia.co. Thanks for listening again and being a supporter of this podcast and everything we do here at My Sunshine Media. And now let's get back to the episode.
It taught me the importance of research, and I think I really hated research early on. It felt like a drag. But then I, started to watch movies and read books that were just not properly researched, or they were about topics that I knew more about than I felt like the filmmakers did, and it pulled me out of the movie. And you realize that specificity is your best friend. So if you need that specificity and that truth through your own lived experience, great. And if you do it through going, it's like no one has, been to Mars, right? But if you want to write a movie about Mars, you better go pick up a book about Mars and read it cover to cover if you want that movie to really jump off the page. And I think that's the difference, because they do tell, students like, hey, write what you know, write what you know. And what you get if there's too much of that is all the students go and write all of these college students end up writing a screenplay, which is a coming of age story about going to a college, coming from a small town, and it's like, well, all of you wrote your experience, which is the same because you're all college students that came from a small town. So that's where you can get into trouble if that becomes you're again, everyone's welcome to write whatever they want, whatever helps them become better writers. But if every single one of your screenplays is that same story over and over again, that's probably where I'd say try writing something that's science fiction, like try breaking out of that mold maybe. But you're right, they do tell you, write what you know starting out, because it's all about specificity and truth.
Yeah. Yeah, because so that's a good question. Like as a writer and a creative person, um, do you have anything that you've done throughout the past few years? Like, do you have a routine or do you have something like traveling? How do you get inspired to like find your next project?
That's a great question. It comes from anywhere. Um, I really love, I don't know, like I do try to pay attention to reels and TikTok and memes and sort of the zeitgeist, whatever's in the current, whatever the current thing is. You never want to chase that because it'll always be gone by the time that you get there. But in terms of doing things that feel fresh and feel new, but you can ground them in existing genre archetypes and things like that. That's something that I enjoy a lot. And then from a creativity perspective, for me, it's all about alternating between periods of intense writing and periods of either editing or filming or vacation, something that's not writing. And so
Hmm.
I can write an entire screenplay in 1 week and it won't be good. I'll need to keep editing it, obviously, but I can do a draft in a week. But I could not do two drafts in 2 weeks because at that point I would get overloaded. So it's for me, it's
Hmm.
very much it's all about the sprint and then kind of just jogging and letting the creative juices regenerate.
Hmm. Yeah. For
I don't
me,
know how
it's
it is
like
for you. It's different
it's
for
a little
everybody. Yeah.
bit. Yeah, yeah. I'm just curious because I've done that where I've tried to do it like in a really short window like that, but I feel like for me being consistent throughout a longer window. I don't, for some reason it seems to be like 8 to 9 months to like it's completely done. Like, but that's also with I guess you could say research and making
Oh yeah.
inspiration along the way. So I'm just curious for you, like how much research and preparation would you do before you did the sprint writing?
It depends if it's a genre that I already know a lot about. Like if it's about the things I know the most about are like science fiction, space exploration. I know a lot about. I know a lot about uh, like sports and like football. I know a lot about, and then I would probably say like I like gaming a lot. I like console gaming and I like mobile gaming to some extent. Board games I like a lot. So if it's one of those things that you know a lot about that you just researched, like chemistry and physics is another one that I have a lot of experience in. So like if it has something to do with those, then I don't have to do too much research going into it. I have to think more about the outlining and the structure and that sort of thing. One project I just did that was not something I knew a ton about was about boxing, and so I had to go and research, like the true story of this boxer and like his connection to everything, and that was one where I had to research it for, a day or two. If I'm talking about, if it's like the creation story, right? If it's like a 7 day creation story,
Mm-hmm.
like day one and day two, it's a lot of research with a little bit of writing, a little bit of outlining, and then those middle days, it's a lot of writing and then jumping back and forth between the research. Um, yeah, I don't know. It really depends, I guess, is the best way to say it. But the one thing that I always say is like, and you've seen this yourself, it's like everybody's different and no one should ever take anyone's writing like style or writing advice as gospel because like I've seen people be like, oh, just write 1 page a day and then it'll be done in 100 days. And that's
Mm-hmm.
good advice for some people and that's terrible advice for other people. I mean, you run the risk of writing, 100 different screenplays in 100 days if you're not able to, focus on, or you stop yourself short. You get halfway through a scene, you're like, well, that was my page, and that can
Mm-hmm.
be tough too. So again, my advice is to never take anyone's advice and just to figure out, I don't know, whatever works best for you, to whatever makes the best results. It's all about results, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I wrote my first novel and published it like a month ago, month and a half. And
Congrats.
yeah, thank you. It was originally a screenplay, and then our friend Alex on the Indie Film Hustle podcast, he had a guest on, like, I don't know when it was, but I saw it last year. And, he was talking about, maybe, they were talking about, like you said, turning a screenplay into a novel and seeing how that goes first, seeing if there's an audience. So I was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, because I was like, yeah, this is going to be, if it's a movie, the budget's going to be higher than my previous one. So I definitely, maybe I should see what this turns out to be before I decide to go make it into a film. So it was interesting just because it was like challenging myself to as a writer, like, can I write a novel and do I enjoy it? So I think the answer was yes to both. But so I was going somewhere with that. So I guess another question I have is, like, on a daily basis, do you have somebody in your life where, like, do you have a corner with like a desk in it? Do you just take your laptop with you? Like, do you have, and then the second part of that is, do you have tools or anything you use, like software, on a regular basis that helps you with kind of your writing process?
Definitely everything I do for the most part is either in Word or in Final Draft. Final Draft definitely remains the industry standard for screenwriting, and it doesn't matter, what version of Final Draft you're using. Every version I've ever used since Final Draft, like 7 or 8, has been fine. It's you probably have to download whatever the most recent one is. There are a lot of people I know that use like Celtics or these other old fashions or not old fashioned, but like the freemium programs, I'd say. And those are really good for starting out. Those are great for getting your first 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours. The first feature I ever wrote was written in Celtics, not in Final Draft. But sooner or later, whenever you do want to start sending your work out, it pretty much has to be Final Draft because that's really the one and only, that's the most important thing. Word obviously is great for outlining. There's nothing wrong with like a pad and paper if I'm trying to like jot down ideas or if I'm thinking through things while I'm not writing, while I'm taking the time away from the desk. I love writing at the desk. I love writing like on the couch. Wherever I'm comfortable, I think is the most important thing. Wherever I can go the most
Mm-hmm.
amount of time without having to like stand up or like go get more soda, diet soda or something like that. That's what I found is the most important thing is like lower back comfort. But that's just me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then in terms of the other filmmaking tools and I mean, Adobe Premiere Pro continues to be a great program. I'm all released. I've done both of my features in Premiere. That one I did in high school, I did in Final Cut. So if you need, if you don't want to pay the subscription for Premiere, you can always do Final Cut.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those would be my favorite tools. Although I have gotten into like the index card, outlining to some extent. I forced myself to do
Mm-hmm.
that, so we'll see if that keeps up.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know. It's any creative person or like specifically writers, in my opinion. Like my sister, I'm a twin and we're pretty close. So, like, we used to live together when we were, well, for a long time, but then in our early 20s. And then, she comes to my room and there's like sticky notes like all over the wall in front of my desk. It looks completely crazy. And she's like, I don't understand what is going, what is that? Like, what? I'm like, it makes sense to me, okay? Like, stop with the
Yeah,
judgment. You don't
she's like, we're
understand.
supposed to
Like,
have twin telepathy, and I don't understand this. So,
yeah,
how did
no.
you?
No, but so anyway, like everybody has like something that is a part of their daily, it's like a habit, and maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not. But yeah, it
Well,
sounds
and
like
I'll
we're
say mine has
mhm,
changed a ton. Like I think when it's a genre or a format that I'm not as familiar with, like if it's a TV pilot, I'll do a lot of outlining going into it. If it's a feature, I've gotten so comfortable with the feature approach that I don't do a lot of outlining at all anymore. And I thought as I kept, working and continuing that my outlines would, continue. But no, it's like I don't outline very much at all when it comes to features and some of my favorite features have come from treatments more so than bullet points.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they taught you this in film school, but they were pretty big on outlining in film school, and
Yeah.
I don't prefer it for a lot of things, but I understand that to make deadlines and to actually finish stuff, sometimes you do. It's helpful. Um, but yeah, I agree. It
If
does
you were doing
change.
like a mystery, or you were doing something where, sort of like Knives Out, like the Knives Out movies, like those outlines are, you got to imagine they're really detailed because everything has to connect. You have to tie up every loose end, and you want to apply that level of uh, specificity to your character arcs, right? You want every character arc to end somewhere and everyone to have a. But again, the nice thing is that again, outside of like a mystery or like like a Wes Anderson like ensemble film where you have like 10 or 15 characters, if you really know what you're doing, I could see how you could get away without doing an outline. But there's never a bad reason to do it. The only bad reason I ever discovered doing outlines was I got really bored writing the scenes that I had outlined the most heavily, I guess. Like
Hmm.
I felt like I was watching the scene all over again, and I was like, oh, I don't want to write this scene. I already wrote it, but now I have to take it from Word into final draft, and I don't
Hmm.
know. That was the only reason I stopped going really nuts with the outlines, was because it felt like I was writing the same thing twice.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, so I guess for those listening, I got a special sneak peek preview of his documentary coming out called Walkout, right? Or just Walkout?
Yeah.
Okay. So
The title's
very
changed a
interesting.
lot, so that's
Okay.
my fault. It's I'm all over the place with the title.
Okay. But yeah, no, it was very interesting. And I'm not going to say much about it because I know it's still coming out. Um, but I'm just curious, what has been the difference that you've noticed, or what have you learned in the process of making a documentary? How is that a little bit different from features, and what was that like
Yeah, and I
transitioning a
know that
bit?
you and I have discussed the documentary approach, and that's I'm excited to see your project as it develops as well. My favorite part about the
Mm-hmm.
documentary was when we made Last Whistle, we had to do it in like the amount of days we were allotted. I think we did 13. We did 6 days, and then we kind of did like a half day, and then we did 6 days, and then it was over. And if we wanted to film more, it had to be without the actors. If we wanted to film more with the actors, that was really complicated, or we had to do like ADR and that sort of thing. But with the documentary, it kind of feels like it's almost like a let's see, I don't know how to put it. Like you get to build it in pieces and parts. You get to go back
Mm-hmm.
and edit. You have a lot more time to work on it. It's been a lot cheaper to produce the documentary than it is to produce the feature film with union contracts and things like that, and locations and that sort of thing. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
I've really enjoyed. I enjoy both processes. I do prefer to do things quickly and just get things released and get them out there. But I think this documentary, I'm okay with it being my one really slow, longer term project in my career, because it's really let me focus on every second of the movie and get it to exactly where I think it's the best possible product. Of course, once I finish the voiceover volume, which which I know I'm still working on. You caught that. I've got to get some sound help.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if it was on my end or I was like something's just a little off. Um, but overall, everything else I had no other notes. Very interesting. Um, so what can you tell us anything about it for those people who want to see it when it comes out? And do you know yet where it
Yeah.
will be available or?
So I think I really want to self distribute this one. Let me take a sip of coffee here. Sorry,
Yeah, you're good.
I'm doing the Marco Rubio, right? Drinking water during um, the so the movie's called Walkout. It's about the mass shooting that was at the El Paso Walmart in 2019, and kind of the fallout and what happened inside Walmart and what they all did. And they, my really good friend from USC ended up being the person that kind of led that crusade at Walmart and kind of like tried to get the company to like change pace. And then what ended up doing was just kind of opening up this can of worms of like, oh, holy crap, like one, you know, employee at one giant company can like almost leverage the entire company to change their, position and then go and lobby the government. And it was crazy to think about 5 years ago how that was kind of just getting going, and now we see it all the time. There are people at every company, every time something happens, where they will come out and say, we inside this company, or as the employees, don't approve of our company doing X, Y, and Z, and then the company has to come back and be like, well, here's what we approve or don't approve. It's like it's turned into this big mess, and I think I wanted to look at that through just a very simple documentary, to talk to my friend Thomas and really just get his side of it. And of course, like I love Walmart. Walmart's everywhere. It's helped us afford a lot of the cost, the price increases that we've seen over the past couple of years. And so it kind of felt like the A-list star of the movie, right? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
documentary about Walmart, more or
Mm-hmm.
less, and about its CEO that they've had for quite a while now, and the work that he does. And I think that he does great work, and I'm just eternally fascinated by the whole story, and it continues to be relevant. It's about guns, it's about unions, and but again, it's kind of looking at all of it through just a really, hopefully you thought it was a more moderate lens, kind of just laying it out as it happened, right, and then letting the viewer take their own, make their own path with what they did or didn't learn from it. So it's called
Mm-hmm.
Walkout. I think I want to self distribute it because I've stuck with it for so long. I would hate to go with a distributor and have them change everything. I think I really want to control this start to finish, and just
Mm-hmm.
continue to learn from that. It's like a distribution model.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably a good idea for you. As someone, this is a side note, a small tip for you. So I actually used to work at Walmart, like in my early,
Wow.
before I went to film school. So when I was just trying to make a little extra cash and like getting ready to head off into a completely different state. Um, so it definitely resonated with me, and I was thinking, I was like, I'm sure you have this somewhere in the description, but when you say walkout, I'm like, it was interesting, but when you realize it's actually about Walmart, the company Walmart, I was like, that to me is probably going to be a very marketable factor, is like making sure people understand walking out of Walmart. You know what I mean? Um, you can take that and do
I'll
whatever you want with it.
definitely.
I'm not
No, thank
saying,
you.
yeah.
That's
Because I,
that's that's a great note, and I need to.
mm-hmm,
A lot of that I'm going to think of that, especially from like a marketing perspective, and maybe like a subtitle or a
mm-hmm.
new title overall. That's super important, and that's why I made the movie, was because it's about Walmart. So that's a great point.
Right, because even if you don't know people don't know this person that that, did this whole rally and was on the news and everything, but they know what Walmart is. It's like, I've shopped there, I might have worked there, like whatever. It's obviously anybody here in America, they know what Walmart is. So that makes,
Totally.
I think that's an interesting point. Um, yeah, and so let me see if I have any other questions because I want to be respectful of your time. Um,
Thanks.
so this is kind of there's two last questions. This one is something I just started asking people. Um, so is during your whole journey of, filmmaking, writing to where you are now, is there a specific person or an organization, an idea, something that you don't talk about a lot, but you think could have value here for other people, or just acknowledging somebody that's helped you get to where you are,
Well,
anything
there
like
are
that.
just 1,000 people that have helped me get to where I am. There are people that supported the last whistle. There are people that supported me in school. There are tons and tons and tons of teachers and professors at every stage that, would, could tell, when I was in their classes or before or after I took their classes that, I had interest in what they were teaching, whether it was from a film perspective or it was history or science or something like that. There is no end to the number of teachers that have influenced my path, and family members that acted as teachers, and really, if I can sum it up into one really succinct thing, it would be that if you're in college or if you haven't gone to college yet, like my favorite thing was, and this kind of works for high school too, but a little more so for college. You go to the first week that the professors offer office hours, uh,
Hmm.
assuming they still do that. Office hours, it's usually they get a lot more people coming in those final few weeks because it's, oh, I really want to do well on your test, or I really need extra credit, or it's like, oh, what do I study, like, what, I missed this class,
Hmm.
what do I that first week of office hours, nobody's there because the first week it's like, here's the syllabus, let's talk about what we're doing a little bit, and see you next week, basically. And so
Hmm.
I really love doing that because you can go in, you can meet the professor, you can talk to them. If they've written a book, they might give you a copy of their book if you didn't have to buy it for the class to start with. It's
Hmm.
cool, and you kind of foster a friendship, and they look for you, even if it's a class of 300 people. They look for you to answer questions and to engage in the class, and to be there, and if they're a good professor, if they're worth their weight and what your tuition is going to pay them, they will have quite a bit to offer you in return,
Hmm.
just from a learning perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So basically, you're just saying go in, introduce yourself, and actually like communicate with the people that you're supposed to be learning from.
Yeah, and anytime you have an opportunity to learn from someone, whether it's free or you paid tuition for it or whatever it may be, recognize that that is rare and special. And if you just focus on what's in their lecture, you won't get as much out of it as if you really engage with the material. And you got to sit there for a couple hours of their class anyway. Why not sink your
Hmm.
teeth into it?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, so the last question is, where can people go to find out more about you and to keep up with all of your projects? What's the best place?
The best place, so I've got a website. The website is smatfilms.com, SMATFILMS.com. I try to keep that updated, but then the day-to-day updates would probably be like my Instagram or my Twitter, which is Wicked Smat. uh,
Okay.
Wicked Smat, like the Boston accent sort of thing.
Okay.
I think on Twitter it's like WICKDSMAT. If you search Smat, you should be able to find me. But there aren't a lot of SMAT people. It's me and my brothers, so you'll find
Okay.
the Wicked Smat.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving up your time, Rob, to tell me more about your story and your projects. And I definitely wish you all the best coming up.
You too. I'm excited to see how your documentary goes. We'll have to keep doing episodes and updating each other.